13th Public Works Committee. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals in the meeting may also be audibly or visibly recording this meeting. Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have an added notice.
Can you get right up to the microphone?
Yeah, you know what, give me a minute here and I'll...
You going to share it with us, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chair, an added notice of motion regarding funding for the Beasley Park project. Added item of other business, signage and enforcement concerns at Albion Falls. And listed in the agenda report 8.2 to be distributed regarding the Hamilton sign at the forecourt of City Hall.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Marula, seconded by Doug. All in favor? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 19th meeting of the Public Works Committee? Moved by Councillor Conley, seconded by Mayor Eisenberger. All in favor? That's carried. Item 5.1 is a report regarding special events requiring temporary road closure. Any discussion on it? If not, I need a motion to approve. Moved by Collins, seconded by Marula. All in favor? That's carried. 5.2 is a report regarding Waste-Free Ontario Act, discussion paper addressing food and organic waste in Ontario. Any discussion on it? Seeing none, you have a motion to receive. Moved by Conley, seconded by Marula. All in favor? That's carried. Public hearing and delegations. Item 6.1 is a public meeting respecting the proposed permanent closure and sale of a portion of a public unassumed alleyway abutting 353 Strathern Avenue, Hamilton. Notice of this meeting appeared in the local newspapers and was posted on the City of Hamilton's website. The notice advised that anyone whose lands prejudicially affected may appear before a committee this morning. The clerk is advised that no individuals have requested to speak to this matter. Is there any members of the public that are with us today that wish to speak to this matter? This is the Strathern Road Alley. For a second time, any members of the public wish to speak to this matter? And for a third and final time, anyone here wishing to speak to this alleyway closure? Okay. Are there any questions from members of the committee? You're moving to approve the report, Councillor Marula? Yeah, I'll move. Second by Councillor Collins. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.1 is a report respecting 18 Sinclair Avenue, Toronto. The report was tabled at the February 13th, 2017 committee meeting. Therefore, I need a motion to lift the report from the table. Moved by Collins, second by Conley. All in favor? That's carried. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Collins.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is one that was before us, and I had it tabled, as you may recall, to meet with Ms. Dabrowski, who is the homeowner at 18 Sinclair. And this is very similar to the Hickson Road property that we dealt with a couple of years ago, and in fact, this one's just around the corner. And this is a very small home that sits on the edge of Red Hill Creek. And as the report indicates, there is severe erosion in the back, and the top of bank is getting precariously close to Mrs. Dabrowski's property. In fact, she's seen slippage now over the last number of springs severely impact her rear yard to the point where her fence is leaning, and it's now close to the home. So our staff went out and did some preliminary investigations. As you can see, we've done some studies with some engineers, and the work to repair the slope in the rear is very significant, very similar to Hickson Road. It would require a number of permits and would require a number of trees to come down in the creek, and significant work would have to take place in order to shore up city property, which is comprised of the slope and of course the rest of the valley. So I would, as was one of the recommendations in the report, I have a motion that I believe Lori has distributed, and it's asking staff then to negotiate with Ms. Dabrowski terms and conditions in which the city would purchase the property, similar to what we did with Hickson Road. Mrs. Dabrowski would have liked to have been here today. She's a senior, she's single, and she's recovering from a surgery. So I know that she's very supportive of what we have in front of us. There's some personal information there that Darlene Cole has included in her from her discussions with Ms. Dabrowski. This is the only home that she's lived in, so this is a very emotional issue for Ms. Dabrowski, and it's been a difficult decision for her to make in consultation with me over the last number of months. So I would ask that if I move to the motions section, that the acquisition of lands municipally known as 18 Sinclair Court be considered by the City of Hamilton, and B, that the real estate section of the Planning and Economic Development Department be authorized and directed to explore the potential costs of acquiring 18 Sinclair and report its findings back to GIC and receive further direction. So essentially, we'd be now seeking to go into negotiation with Mr. Dabrowski with the terms to come back to council for its
And
consideration.
it's coming back to GIC, not back to this committee.
As recommended by
And I
staff.
understand it's seconded by Councillor Brulok. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Collins. I know this has been another difficult issue for you to deal with regards to the Red Hill. But I just wanted to ask a question. I have no problem with direction or assisting, because 7 feet is less than our rear yard setback, so I'm very concerned as well. Are there any other houses, the abutting homes, will they be in the same situation in the future?
There's one adjacent home. She's the end home on the one part of the street. So there's one home that has a much larger rear yard, although we've seen some slippage, but it's further well away from the house at this point, so there's no concerns at this time. But it is an issue that I've had to deal with on Hickson, Sinclair now, Montmorency, and of course we lost a townhouse on Quigley in the late 90s. And so it's likely that, you know, we'll find ourselves in this situation again, not knowing what the weather holds every spring, although we've seen what's happened on the escarpment. It will happen.
Councillor Pearson.
Appreciate that information. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the recommendation to have a staff report back to GIC on 18 Sinclair? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item 8.2 is a report respecting the installation of a Hamilton sign in the forecourt of the City Hall. I understand there's no presentation, but Mayor Eisenberger, do you wish to speak to this matter?
And thank you for that opportunity. And in the yellow copies, you have a more complete report in the yellow copies with a picture on the back, if you flip it right over. And I've spoken to all members of council on this issue in terms of highlighting what was intended and what is proposed. And I want to thank Laura Babcock and PJ Mercanti for helping spearhead the fundraising on this issue, and I think what I think most have accepted as a really good idea to help animate the forecourt of City Hall, and you know, put a stamp on kind of the Hamilton image as well in terms of bringing some vitality to what is a fairly plain forecourt, but still something that could use some additional assistance. I have to say that some have suggested that others are spearheading this thing. It was actually my idea at the beginning of the year to come forward with some alternative plan, and I recall that this council, previous to my return, had considered a sign, a gateway sign, and decided that it wasn't something they were prepared to fund. And so I took it upon myself to see if we could come up with something that had a good design, as well as something that could animate the forecourt. And we've got a local provider that has done the design and research, in fact, of many, many different signs and locations throughout the world. And we came up with, I think, a design that's relatively unique. So I know most members of council are well aware of the issues. It will require a heritage permit, and that certainly will be applied for. And there are the location that's identified in the picture is actually at the very front end of the forecourt on the left side over here. An alternate position is actually closer to the building on the same side, and you know, I think that's something that will be pursued, subject to locates and all the things that facilities management would be concerned about. We've spoken with building department and the permanent sign bylaw people, and apparently none of those requirements apply to this particular sign. And so the only issue that remains to be sorted out is your approval and the Heritage Committee approval in terms of locating it at the forecourt. So I'm hopeful that we can get support for this, and I'm thankful for the efforts that others have put into this to make this happen. It would be, I think, a spectacular gift to the City of Hamilton from the business community to celebrate Canada 150. And I'm hopeful that it gets strong support here, that we can move on and get this thing done sometime this year.
Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the mayor for bringing this forward and the work he's done behind the scenes. I guess we didn't, at the beginning of the agenda, Mr. Chairman, we didn't make an exemption to allow PJ Mercanti to possibly answer some questions. So I guess the mayor, if possible, then could answer any of my curiosities, or committee could always have.
Sure, we
course.
can always have a motion to ask PJ to come up if you have questions for him.
Okay. Would you be comfortable with that, PJ, if possible? Is that all right, Mr. Chairman?
Just move it.
Could I move that now, that we
Yep.
allow that as a
Move the motion that PJ
delegation
be
to
allowed to
answer?
come up to the podium, seconded by Councillor Connolly. All in favor?
Carried.
PJ?
Thank you very much,
come up
Mr.
to the
Chairman.
podium.
Thank you. PJ, I hope not putting you on the spot. You're very comfortable at this podium. You've been here many a time on many issues. So just, Mr. Chairman, through you to, thank you, thanks committee, through you to PJ. PJ, just any initial comments before I ask a couple of questions in terms of the overall project?
We're certainly very excited, Laura Babcock and I, and I know that years ago, Laura was advocating for a Hamilton sign and something that would speak to the city, where we're going, and making sure that we have the proper branding for the city. So when Laura had talked about that years ago, and Mayor Fred connected on the idea of making this come to life, I was certainly very excited. I think it's great timing, and certainly look forward to helping to move this forward.
Thank you, PJ, for the opening remarks. So, Mr. Chairman, and again, maybe either the mayor or PJ, I'll let between the two of them if they want to either answer or both. So this is only a curiosity. And again, credit to Laura Babcock, who was the thrust behind some form of branding and signage for the city. And I remember last term of council, if memory serves, and this is the curiosity, last term of council, when it was for a gateway sign, I remember a private fundraising campaign that Laura initiated. And if I recall, our city manager reported back that after a month or two of efforts, that it was a bit paltry in terms of the response in the private sector, and that was for the time of the Pan Am Games. And so that was for more of a gateway on the highway type of sign. So fast forward to this, in front of City Hall, Canada 150, and the only thing, my curiosity is, private sector has come forward in a way that they didn't a few years ago, and maybe either the mayor or PJ can maybe give me some ideas as to what the difference was today. Is it the location in front of City Hall, if you will, this august building and seat of municipal government? Is it the fact that the Canada 150 timing was different? That's just a curiosity on my part, Mr. Chairman. Either
Let's start
through
with
to the mayor or PJ.
And then we'll go to the mayor afterwards if necessary.
So a few comments on that. I think the mayor's passion for this project certainly is helping to push it forward in a much different way. I also think that the timing of the Canada 150 is also another key aspect of that. You know, the business community thought this would be a great gift to the city, something to commemorate Canada and Hamilton. And I also think that in the last couple of years, there's been an enhanced momentum for all things Hamilton. I think that the city is moving forward, and this is another sign of the great things that are happening in Hamilton. And from a marketing and branding perspective, I think that this sign is timely. Today with social media, Facebook and Instagram, people love taking pictures around city landmarks. I could see this sign being one of the most photographed images in all of Hamilton. I could see people, bringing their friends from out of town, friends from across, different countries into the core, taking pictures here. So I see it as a tremendous branding opportunity for the city as well. And it's not uncommon for cities to have big, exciting signs, and so I think it's a timely move for Hamilton to get behind this type of a project.
Thank you, PJ. Mr. Mayor?
So I can't say it much better than that. I think the collective, the gateway sign issue was kind of an isolating issue. It didn't allow for a lot of public access, and I think that's the difference in this particular instance. Is this is actually going to be in a place where we are inviting the public to come to. It's very much a Hamilton issue. If it hadn't been out in the gateway location at McQuestion Bridge area, which I think was the previous kind of locale. It was out of the way, not particularly accessible, and wouldn't really provide the kind of connection that I think people are interested in. And so a combination of some Hamilton pride, some additional Hamilton pride, the great work we're doing in the city of Hamilton in terms of the great vibe that we're all experiencing, and the renaissance that people are particularly proud of. And I think the business community has been quite interested in participating in that and demonstrating that through a gift of a sign. I think that speaks well to their view that we're moving in a very positive direction, and they want to be part of adding to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairman, maybe to PJ as well, and thank you, PJ, yourself, as, if you will, co-captain of this campaign, and for all the private investors and donors that have come forward in our city. What's the expectation in terms of naming and recognition, if you will, Mr. Chairman? Through you to either the mayor or PJ?
PJ?
So I think that that's still being formulated, and certainly the individuals that have signed on thus far aren't expecting a lot in the form of recognition for themselves. You know, they certainly do want to have, be at the groundbreaking and be a part of the excitements of the day when it is unveiled. But there certainly hasn't been big demands or expectations put upon us in the form of this is what we want in the form of recognition.
That's wonderful. Mr.
Just
Mayor?
to add to that, there will be a plaque on there somewhere.
Okay.
Not a massive one. It's not going to overshadow the sign. The sign is intended to be, speak to Hamilton, but somewhere on the sign there will be a plaque identifying the donors that have contributed to making it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairman, the process, many in the community always argue about public process. Are we comfortable in terms of the sole source we did with the local artist? Mr. Chairman, through you to either the mayor or PJ. And again, I don't even know who the local artist was.
More appropriate to the mayor for that
Perfect.
question.
The local artist is identified in the report. His name is Mike. He is in Dundas, and he's had a history of doing public art in the city of Hamilton. It's Hamilton Scenic Specialty. I'd actually invited him to come in and provide us some examples of signs around the world, and then create some sort of a design. And he came up with a number of different ideas and examples, and came up with what ultimately is on the back page here, which I think is a very interesting, yet formulaic type of sign, but one that provides access and lighting and variability in terms of changing all the lighting through digital means. And so, as it's a gift to the city of Hamilton, not unlike the Ukrainian statue gift that sits beside City Hall here, that was given to the city by the Ukrainian community. They fundraised it, they paid for it. I believe the city of Hamilton, in fact, paid for the base, as I recall it. Or the engineering ring that's out there that was funded through McMaster Engineering, or the engineering community, and we provided the base, and they provided the actual monument itself.
That was,
that
was the migration statue. You're right,
That's
Mr.
right.
Mayor.
And in the
Yep.
same way, this is a gift to the city of Hamilton at no cost to the city of Hamilton. They're going to provide all the capital costs as well as the installation costs that go with it. And so from a sole sourcing process, I mean, we could get into a design competition, I suppose, and that would probably take many more months.
Okay.
And I'm pretty comfortable with the design, and I would hope that this can be done this year. If we had to go through some other process, it would go well beyond that, and I'm not sure that it would change the end result significantly, quite frankly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And last question, if everything's a go today, are we satisfied that we can meet any of the heritage permit requirements, Mr. Chairman? I guess that would be more
Probably better for the mayor.
Yeah, for the mayor. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, through you, no problem. Just if this is a go today, are we pretty well satisfied in your consultation that the heritage permit hopefully should be favorable down the road, and hopefully there won't be any hiccups with that?
Well, I'm hopeful. We've had other installations put in there in the past. Flower boxes come to mind, and I'm not sure that this detracts from the heritage of the building. I think it adds to the Well, it could be permanent. I mean, it's going to be, it's something that's intended to be there a long time, quite frankly. And so I'm hopeful that the heritage permit process will allow for this kind of addition to the forecourt that I think will add value.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the mayor, thanks to PJ and his team from a volunteer standpoint and from a financial contribution standpoint for getting this project over the goal line. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I have no other speakers. I want to turn the chair over to Councillor Mula for 1 second, just a few questions. Number one, I want to thank the mayor for his leadership on this and getting it across the finish line. I think it will enhance the front of City Hall and will give a destination for visitors to come and get their picture taken. I understand the colors can be changed, so it could be red and white in Canada Day, orange and Halloween, green and red at Christmas. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. This is digital lighting in the interior of the sign, and it can be changed to any range of colors that you can program into it. So it's completely variable. So if we have a Canada Day, it can be red and white. If we have a Hamilton Day, it can be blue and yellow. If there's a tragedy that happens in France or anywhere else, and we want to show sympathy, we can arrange it to the colors of the flag. Each one of those letters can be a different color, so it's got complete variability in terms of digital lighting.
Is it very simple to change the color? For example, if someone's having their birthday and their favorite color is yellow, can they make arrangements to flip it to yellow?
So there's a possibility that we could create an app that one could actually go to the sign and actually change the color at that moment in time.
On the fly?
On the fly, right. Now, that's something that obviously the city could turn on and off depending on what the events were. So if we had an event that we wanted to highlight in terms of color, that we could turn that off and have only that one color. But there's a potential for walking up to the sign through an app, change the colors as you desire at that moment in time, and then obviously it would revert back at some other time.
Okay, and the only negative question I've had from my constituency is there's a sign producer that wanted an opportunity to bid on it, and he won't be because we're sole sourcing this. I guess the answer to that is because the private sector is paying for it, and that was their decision.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the folks that are going to be paying for it are comfortable with the design and the process that we went through to get to this design. And, I think that if they're going to provide a gift, I think they would have some say in terms of what the sign might look like and where it might go and how that gets delivered. So, yeah, I would agree with your answer on that one.
Okay, and driving this morning, I slowed right down, not blocking traffic too much, just to take a final look. Our horticulture department does an amazing job with City Hall, particularly the front and the rear, but the front. Will any of those flower beds be lost because of this sign?
Not the flower beds themselves, but the large square flower blocks that are standing out there may move as a result of the location of the sign.
Oh, they're easy to move. They're just picked up by a forklift, but the actual beds are not going to be blocked by
We're not
the
going to
sign.
interfere with anything structurally on the City Hall forecourt.
Okay, and my last comment is the gateway sign at Highway 6 and the 403. I recall one of the biggest stumbling blocks of that one was the Book 7 regulations where you had to do lane closures to go in there and do the installation and do the maintenance. And that was going to cost in excess of $200,000 to get the proper equipment in to formally close a lane on Highway 403 where that was done. And of course, we don't have that problem here. So I'm very much in support of this. So I'll take the chair back. Mr. Councilor Marula, I don't see any other requests for speakers, so, Councilor Farr.
Thanks, PJ, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate that there's a sense of urgency or an expeditious nature to bringing this forward, and for good reason, in my opinion. This is Canada 150, and I also appreciate that the private sector has stepped up, and that I truly do believe 100% that this will be a wonderful selfie opportunity at the very least, and show off our wonderful heritage here at City Hall. I just have one question because it's generally coming from my constituency. I've seen 2 emails now, and it's with respect to, and it's from the arts community. And so there are some arts community asking why we're not appreciating the current process through our public art office culture. Certainly one that is time consuming. It works really well, but often takes 2 to 3 years. And that's out of the question considering your timelines here. So what is my answer, or what is our answer to those folks who rightly point out we do have a process, and in this case we are maybe not manipulating the process, but bypassing the public art process through you to PJ, and maybe the mayor
Sure.
would want to comment.
I think that a lot of the folks that are part of the project, the stakeholders, were very satisfied with the look and the design, felt that it spoke to Hamilton's heritage, and it had enough unique elements, artistic elements, to make it versatile, the lighting changes, et cetera. And I guess another fear would be that of, if we had a more onerous process, it could delay things tremendously. And there was a lot of fear that this could become one of those things that never gets done if we put it through a process of that nature. We felt that by keeping it relatively narrow, it would mitigate a lot of other ideas and what this could become. And the fear was that it may stray from its original vision to become something that it was never intended to be. So I guess it was primarily, focused on making sure that we can get it done within the Canada 150 year.
Okay? Okay, so Mayor Eisenberger, do you want to move it? And seconder, Councillor Connolly, further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. PJ, thanks again for your ongoing commitment to Hamilton.
Oh, thank you. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Councillor Bruno.
Absolutely, thank you.
Just on this particular issue, I think some of the concerns that Councillor Farr brought forward is something that could potentially occur in the future as well. And I think because of the uniqueness of this type of endeavor, that we try to formulate a policy that if somebody in the future wants to donate from the private sector to the city, that policy outline exactly what the process is. So at present, we would have to justify ourselves every time that occurs, and I think we could use this example as a catalyst to have something enshrined in policy so it protects future endeavors accordingly.
Okay.
So if I could move that staff formulate or draft the policy
Policy.
accordingly, and that's seconded by Mayor Eisenberger.
Bring it here or bring it to GIC?
Here, I guess, would be
Okay,
fine.
to report back to Public Works. You got that, Madam Clerk? Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you, PJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, let's move on to 9.1. Councillor Collins, will you please introduce your motion about the committee to the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup Initiative?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Jackson and I are members of Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee, and this is a recommendation from that committee. They're seeking Public Works and council support to become a member of this organization, and they ask that Councillor Jackson and I presented here today, and I believe that the whereases sufficiently cover the reasons why. As council knows, we are a part of the Keep America Beautiful Canadian chapter, and this is another national organization on the Canadian front that coincides and is in keeping with our mandate at Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee. So it's before you for your consideration, and it's seconded by Councillor Jackson.
Okay, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Item 10.1, Councillor Collins, I'll call you to introduce the added notice of motion on behalf of Councillor Farr. He left, did he? Respecting the
As is typical of
the
council.
fund for the Beasley Park project. Well, let's just leave it as a notice then. You want to do that? No. Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Marulo to waive the rules. The move by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Marulo. Do you want to discuss the motion at all, Councillor Collins? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Councillor Pearson.
Only typo error, it is Cell Tower Reserve. It should be, I just spoke to Councillor Farr before he left. It says Bell Tower, it's Cell Tower. Thank you.
You'll make that correction, Madam Clerk? Okay, to the motion, all in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Item 11.1, can I have a motion to approve item 11 point? Yes, Councillor Collins. Oh, okay. Is this it here?
And it's only here today because it's time sensitive, and I'll wait for the clerk to distribute.
Let me just, can you give me a minute, give me the minute to read it?
And I'll start to explain while you're reading. So I have a subdivision that was planned in 2000 and constructed in 2005, and the residents appealed to us to remove the boulevard, which is becoming a common occurrence in subdivisions across the city. And we acquiesced at committee, and Phase 2 is under construction right now, and it now includes a boulevard. And so the residents of this subdivision are now looking at their neighbors. They would like a consistent design throughout the survey, and I have the survey is almost completely done at this point, so I couldn't really hold over till August because I may miss the opportunity. If the sidewalks are poured, there's obviously no opportunity to change the design. So I have met with engineering, and this is the wording that they agree upon.
Okay, need a motion to waive the rules and move by Collins, second by Marula. All in favor, carried. Then it's being funded from the Ward 5 area rating. Discussion on it? Moved by Collins, second by Marula. Yes, Councillor Conley. Yep.
I'm just trying to get it clear in my head because I had a very similar one a month ago, 2 months ago, I guess.
Can you get right up to the microphone, Councillor? I can barely hear you.
What can I do? Just get nearer?
Just get up a
Never
little
been
closer.
accused of not talking well enough. Thank you, buddy. I had a similar situation in my ward, and so are the curbs not in, the sidewalks aren't in yet, none of that stuff, because in my case, the actual curbs were in, but the sidewalk wasn't in yet, and I was told that because the curbs are in, that we couldn't do it. And what's the difference on this one? I'm not against it, I'm just trying to get
the
clear.
curbs are,
Through the chair, please.
sorry, yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, the curbs are in, and the light standards are in, and so the cost of then relocating the light standards, because they would now be where the sidewalks are, and the cost of constructing and pouring the sidewalks adjacent to a curb that's already been poured are reflected in Part C, so that's where the 84,000 comes from.
Councillor Conley?
So, through the chair, so it could have been done that would you tear out the curbs and redo the curbs? Because
Apparently-
I was told all the,
Yeah. Apparently, they have to connect the concrete to the curb in a way that is a little bit more expensive than if they were just pouring them as a standalone pour.
yeah,
And
I
so
really,
these costs are from the engineer that I guess has provided the drawings to the city. And
I
it's a-
really wish I had this information a month ago, because I was told it couldn't be done. And what about hydrants, water hydrants? Are they in the way? Do you have to
Apparently,
be
those are
moved?
not in the way, so we're fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. I think we're going to get more of this. I know in my area, we're going to get more of this. And I don't know how we're going to nip it in the butt before it's too late. Because what happens is they find out at the last minute, the residents do, that they're losing 10 or 12 or 15 feet of their property because the sidewalks are going and there's a 2-meter. And I don't know if it's a policy thing or when we're approving these developments, do we look at that aspect of it? Because I was told that our standard is boulevards, and that's it. But obviously, the standards can change, and how do we deal with that so we don't don't come to this situation again in the future? Through the chair.
Mr. Chairman, I completely agree. I was in this situation in 2005, and now, back in 2005, I was forced to get a document signed by every single legal owner of the subdivision to ensure that everyone was in agreement with the new standard, because they purchased their home with a boulevard. And so it becomes an exhaustive process, as you've just noted. This is the third time for me. I know Councillor Duval was through it twice. I believe Councillor Conley, you've been through it now once or twice. And so I would agree, if staff could report back on the whole issue related to the Boulevard standard, it probably would save us a lot of time and grief in the future. When residents buy the house, they look at the house, they don't look at the property. When they see the stakes go in the ground and they see how short the driveway is, and there's a boulevard, then it starts to cause some concerns. So I completely agree with the comments.
Sounds like plans a condominium for non-townhouses.
Yes, along the same lines, yes.
Yeah.
So if Councillor Conley, apart from this, wants to make a motion to ask staff to report back on the options and alternatives for future designs, I'd be completely supportive of that.
I would like to do that, but I'd like to ask if there's any comments from staff. I don't see anybody here from,
Well, probably Gary. You'd like to comment on
Engineering.
Gary or Dan?
could talk to about it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, if that's the request of committee, I would suggest it would come back through planning, because these are specifications that are maintained by the planning department through growth management.
Tony? Yeah, Tony's not here. Okay. At the right time, I'll make that motion to have it investigated and report back to planning or public works, I guess.
Sounds like planning is what Dan suggested.
Planning?
Tony Sergi,
Okay.
growth development. Okay, so there's no more comments. It's moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Mula to fund it from the Ward 5 area rating account. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. We have an added item of general information and other business from Councillor Jackson respecting the signage and enforcement of concerns at Albion Falls. Councillor Jackson, can I call on you to lead off
Just
the
while we're on
discussion?
the subject of the last ones, should I make that motion now to have a report back, or should I make it? Should it be now?
I heard, you're on planning, are you not?
I am.
Would it be more appropriate, since it's a planning report, to raise that motion at planning or here?
I think it'll be here, and it'll be forwarded to planning to be on their agenda.
Okay, place your motion then. Place your motion.
Well, the motion is to have a report back on the boulevard standards and the flexibility that we could or might have in that. And that I think we have to know that the people buying their houses have to know about this well in advance, because I had 40 people that didn't know their sidewalk was going to be so far up. So
That's quite a long motion. Would it be appropriate?
know.
Would it be appropriate, Councillor Conley, that we'll go to Councillor Jackson next, and I'll come back to you when you can write out a motion so the clerks can take that and we know exactly what we're voting on? Oh, Dan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe at this point it's just appropriate to have a presentation at planning on the standards, so you can get an explanation of it, and then you can move something at that point.
That's right.
There's just a motion to ask Planning Department to report back to Planning Committee on Boulevard standards. Is that the right thing to call
For
it?
new subdivisions.
You got that, Madam Clerk? Okay, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. So Councillor Jackson, over to you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you very much for allowing this walk-on item today. And thank you to Laurie Leduc, Legislative Assistant, for preparing the agenda accordingly. And before I turn it over to our new Parks Manager, Kara Bunn, who will give an overview of where we've been and why we just wanted to apprise committee of measures taken up to now at Albion Falls and stages of other initiatives to come. I want to just make a couple of opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, and then afterwards, after Kara speaks, and after all questions of Kara may be completed, I would just appreciate you come back to me for some closing remarks, please. So just some opening remarks. I guess with the increased popularity of our waterfalls across the city, not just in my specific area of the Buttermilk Albion Falls area, but across the entire city, I've always called it, suddenly we've got a nice problem on our hands. It's wonderful that both Hamiltonians, Mr. Chairman, in increasing numbers, and visitors to our city are recognizing the majesty and the beauty of our gorgeous panoramic views and and destinations to attend to and to visit with family and friends, and all the tourism and economic spin-offs that come with that. but it's created some additional challenges for us as well. Excuse me. So with those challenges, excuse me, with those challenges have come, yeah, well, I just love these falls so much, and I just get kind of choked up over them. With
Take a glass of water.
with the challenges have, the challenges that have come, Mr. Chairman, have been that we've got people that are coming to this terrain for the first time in many cases, and unlike generational families of Hamiltonians who have told me anecdotally many stories since these number of incidents, unfortunately, that these misadventures that have occurred at Albion in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, many generational Hamiltonians who visited the falls regularly have told me anecdotally they knew where to go, they knew where not to go at the falls. But we've got a new era of people visiting, both within our city and from outside our city, and hence the challenges that are being created. And so we have, I put together, just so that the committee knows, Mr. Chairman, last summer actually I started putting together a multi-departmental, multi-agency team, which includes departments like Parks, of course, Risk Management, John McLennan, who's here, Communications with Jen Racine and Jasmine Graham, with the emergency responders of police, fire, paramedics, all at the table, the Hamilton Conservation Authority, my bordering colleague, Doug Conley, who has the Devil's Punch Bowl in his area. He's been a wonderful support at the table as well. We've had MLE, Kelly Barnett, at the table too. And we've been in consultation with agencies like the Bruce Trail Association, the Escarpment Project pioneer, Greg Lenko, and now the Hamilton Burlington Trails Council as well. So the whole goal, Mr. Chairman, is, in light of the challenges and the increased popularity, is to provide as safe an access as possible to this most prestigious area of our city, and I'm site-specifically talking about Albion Falls and the Little Buttermilk Falls just to the side of it, but also to ensure that people are not going beyond a point where they're putting themselves at risk, putting themselves in harm's way in a dangerous situation that has sadly, in a couple of occurrences, 2 or 3 occurrences in the last few years, resulted in the ultimate tragedy. And I care about every life, and there's just been a number of rope rescues. So we have recently, upon the multi-departmental, multi-agency team, we've been meeting regularly the last few months, we've come up with stages of implementation and measures, and at this point, I will turn it over to Kara to describe them. Kara's provided, I want to thank her, she's provided a wonderful last-minute handout for all of my colleagues, and if the media don't have it, I'm sure Kara could get copies to the media after this meeting, highlighting exactly the areas of the falls, where people should go, where they should not go, and possible future initiatives down the road. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me that long preamble, and I would now ask that Kara take it over from here.
Kara, welcome, and so you give us your comments, please.
Sure, through the chair. As you can see from this map that I've provided, one of the first things we decided to do was to put in additional fence sections. We determined there was no safe route from the top to the bottom, and that there was a lot of unauthorized footpaths that have been created. From those footpaths, a lot of people were getting into trouble because they thought it was a path that everyone was taking, started down it, and then realized too late that it was pretty precarious. And so we determined that we needed to block those accesses. On the map, you can see we already had some existing fence sections that's shown in green. So we matched the same type of fencing and proposed new sections in red and yellow. You see those locations. The red sections are almost complete, will be complete by this weekend, and we're hoping that the yellow section will also go in by this weekend. Based on today's weather, it might be delayed a little bit. What we also did, and we found this quite successful, if you look at page 2, we put some cut brush in areas where people were walking onto these unauthorized footpaths. That's been very successful because people don't want to try and crawl through that. So we'll continue to do that in different locations as we see them. So the other thing that we're working on is signage. If you look at page 5, you'll see some examples of some of the signs that we'll be putting in place. Those signs are very similar to what HCA does. They're more pictorial and utilize a lot of symbols, and they're very clear in their messaging. We'll be putting those up along the fence once the fence is in place, and we'll have those in place by this weekend as well. We'll also be creating a new sign that is a map. That map will show people where the parking lots are, where the designated viewing platforms are, and which trails, which are our Red Hill Trail and the Bruce Trail side trail, where those trails are, because those are authorized. All these other side paths are not. The other thing that we're looking at is putting up some no public access signs. That will be contingent on how the discussions go today about whether we want to look at future measures. As far as future measures, we're proposing that sometime in the future, people really do want to get to the base of the falls. So if we put in place some sort of stairs and viewing platform to the bottom, that would be ideal, but it's a very large project, would take several years to get in place, and would cost a lot of money, potentially more than $1 million. So, and then the other thing that we're looking at is, and this is for discussion today, is do we want to start charging people for trespassing? There's an opportunity there to do it in two ways. We can charge through the Trespass to Property Act through the police, or we can use our parks bylaw to lay charges. In our bylaw, it talks about restricted areas and that you can't enter any areas that are posted to prohibit or restrict admission to the public, of the public, and also that we could charge people if they're climbing on the slopes. We also, in item 8 of our bylaw, which is 01-219, that you can't climb anything other than something that was designated for climbing, such as our play structures.
So there's no particular recommendations unless, Councillor Jackson, you have it related to enforcement then. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Kara, thank you so much. Well described the various stages of what staff have done and what they're informing this committee. I guess, Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, Kara and myself and the team, in terms of putting up the more restrictive signs of no trespassing, and obviously, as you see on the last page, some of the pictorial signs, similar to the Conservation Authority, have done, and Kara and I, along with several members of the team, I call it the Albion Falls team, we walked over near the Webster Twos area a few weeks ago, and again, in great collaboration with agencies like the Conservation Authority, we're picking each other's brains in terms of what best to use elsewhere, and so you see the pictorial signs there that show stay on marked trails and beware of falling rocks, these type of signs that Kara wishes to put up. The no trespassing, I'm a supporter of them, Mr. Chairman, and it's not necessarily that I think we need a motion today, but if there's any objection to it, I think that's what Kara wanted to hear from this committee that she reports to, that if there was any concern or objection, that would be the time to air it. Otherwise, it's within her purview to move forward because it's protecting a public asset that falls completely under her domain. Many people get confused with the various falls, the 70-some-odd main falls across our city. Some assume they're all Conservation Authority, some assume they're all under the City of Hamilton, but as we've learned, it's a mix of various areas of jurisdiction, and the Devil's Punch Bowl, for example, half of it is under the HCA and half of it is under the City of Hamilton, is my understanding. So, Mr. Chairman, today was mainly just to ensure that committee is giving thumbs up to the work of the team, thumbs up to saying, look, additional deterrents have to be put in place at this time. If you look on the main map on the first page that Kara produced here, you see where the blue lines are for the Bruce Trails, side trails, Red Hill Trails. It shows people how safely they can walk with all the markings along the perimeter of Albion Falls, coming up from Red Hill Valley, Bruce Trail, going along Mud Street, going along Mount Brow Boulevard, up to the North Parking Lot where the Heritage Stone is, and the lookout platforms the city built 12 years ago, then going back into Upper Kings Forest area as well. But, as Kara said, there's what I would call, Mr. Chairman, not only the thrill seekers, but I'll say for everyday folks that want to be part of the natural, gorgeous areas of our city. I'll call it there's an excitement within many people and families that just want to be as close to the water as they possibly can. Sadly, they're getting to a point using, as Kara called them, the old goat trails, the beaten down dirt pathways that lead sometimes to nowhere, and where people maybe should stop even using them, where they shouldn't be using them, period. But if they're using them, they're getting to a point where that rock slips or that piece of dirt gives way, and they're tumbling down, sadly, to a misadventure and causing themselves some harm, and ultimately, in a few cases, the sadness of their death. So Mr. Chairman, we have to, I'm strongly supportive of the 6-foot chain link black fence. We're going to carry it around. By the way, I have, with no cost or no bumping of any other capital projects through my Ward 6 area rated reserve, I funded at Kara's request because of her capital budget that is exhausted for this year. I funded the $50,000 under infrastructure improvements, which make things safer at a city-owned asset being Albion Falls. And if there's additional fencing costs in the yellow area you see, which is around what's dubbed the Lover's Leap area, where there's this wonderful, massive ledge that people get to that's right across, directly across from the falls. Many a person, many a couple have gone there, hence I suppose the dub term, Lover's Leap. But we're going to put as well fencing around there to provide safe viewing as well there. So, Mr. Chairman, my ultimate goal, Kara's alluded to it, is as I was fortunate to get council support about 12 years ago through the Future Fund, $500,000, we built the lookout platforms in the North Parking Lot, and council was very supportive then. It was a legacy project. Many visitors to Albion use it. Sadly, unfortunately, it's not close enough to the water for those that just want to take that picture beside the water and have the excitement of being as close to Mother Nature as possible. So I've said in the media in the last few months, and Kara has reiterated it, I'm glad that her and staff are on side to doing some preliminary work in design and exploration of engineering studies, that ultimately it's obvious to me people want to get close to the falls if the city, underline, if we can provide a safe, structured, handrail type of access pathway closer from the south side of the falls, which is coming down Mud Street where it joins the Brow. From that point down close to the base of the falls, I'm all for that. I'm fully supportive of that longer term project. But again, I will ultimately have to submit a plan, possibly to the Hamilton Future Fund again this fall, if Kara and the team can put some preliminary designs and plans together. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I have not given up on shock signs. Some members of the team strongly believe it. Greg Lenko of the Escarpment Project, who has an army of 700, 800 volunteers that cleans up the Albion Falls area at the end of April every year and does it safely with hundreds of volunteers. He told us the wonderful record the other day we met with him, the wonderful record he's had with hundreds of volunteers picking up broken toilets and illegally dumped garbage at the base of the falls. No incidents whatsoever with his volunteers. They have instructions what to do, where to go, what gear to wear, hiking boots, etc., proper gear. And so he is supportive in the shock sign possible implementation, which would be massive signs in certain areas where they've been a disproportionate number of rope rescues that would say danger, X number of rope rescues, X number of tragedies that have occurred in this spot. I'm still all for that. Whatever deterrence we can put in place, Mr. Chairman, to even cause those risk takers a pause before they get themselves in a situation that they'll regret. That's why I'm very supportive of what we've done to now, the additional measures, the no trespassing signs that then would give MLA and police and by law the authority to charge people if they're going past a certain point. And ultimately, though, the ultimate capital goal is to build a project that will get people closer to the falls if it's possible. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence. I've spoken a lot, but Kara and I, on behalf of the team, simply want to ensure that this committee is saying, from everything they've heard and seen, we're going in the right direction, and if no trespassing signs need to be put up at this time to keep people on the proper marked trails, that's the right way to go. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Councillor Jackson for his leadership on this file. But one thing that I do want to emphasize is that I'm very familiar with this area, having grown up in that neighborhood, and it is somewhat concerning that some of these trails kind of bait people to actually access them and bring them to an area that's somewhat dangerous.
These are the goat trails.
Yes. So having said that, though, clearly we're getting a great deal of publicity on this. So there's an element out there of people that I think, because of the fact we're telling them not to, is actually encouraging them to do it. And it's quite concerning along those fronts, because you're trying to help somebody help themselves and protect themselves, yet they choose to act irresponsibly. I'm wondering, I think, and as it reads here, there's no public access, maximum fine, $10,000. You know, I think we need to be a little aggressive on the enforcement component and maybe consider proactive enforcement for a short period of time. Because once the word is out that someone was fined at $10,000, I think that in itself will create a deterrence. At present, I think because we're not proactively enforcing the bylaw, people are not taking it seriously. So I'd like to strongly advise that we proactively enforce, that staff be directed to do that accordingly, and we do it sooner rather than later. Because really, there's no gray area in this thing. It can be life-threatening, and if we're not enforcing proactively, then we're providing an environment conducive to this irresponsible behavior. And I'm prepared to help people help themselves, help protect themselves. And as a result, I'm encouraging that very strong proactive enforcement. If I need to bring forward a motion accordingly, I will. If direction is good enough, then I'll leave it at that.
Just so we're clear on that, and I don't know who in staff can answer this, maybe Kara, you can. If you post no trespassing, you can automatically enforce, or do you need council direction on that?
We can automatically enforce.
Okay. So once they install the no trespassing signs, staff can, at their discretion, go ahead and fine people.
Right, so what I'm, I guess, providing direction accordingly is that we set up a schedule, a blitz for this season, and enforce as heavily as possible, just to get the message out there that we're literally serious about enforcing it, because to date, I don't think anybody's been fined or charged, so I think once the word is out that we're serious about it, that in itself will create a deterrence.
Okay, I see Director Leenders is here. Did you want to comment on the enforcement at all, Ken?
Through you, Mr. Chair, on enforcement, obviously, the Trespass Property Act is enforced by the Hamilton Police Service, and they have usually the jurisdiction in that. In relation to the Parks Authority, we have always been more of a reactive enforcement. There's a gentle balance, though, because if you proactively enforce, the last thing you want is people running away from you. And I know there's been some occasions in other parks that have led to some very serious incidents. So it's a gentle balance. Certainly one of the enforcement areas, if the fire department has to dispatch to someone and they're spending hours pulling someone out, I think that'd be a perfect opportunity to use some enforcement on that as well.
So you're suggesting then, Ken, for safety reasons, you don't want to chase someone because they could walk off the side of the cliff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. The last thing we want is an officer chasing after someone to enforce, because once they see they're there, they may go down deeper. We're certainly not going to send our officers down these trails as well. So, but I mean, the captured market that you have is when someone actually needs support or a rescue. I mean, obviously they're they're impacting the city, and so that might be the most appropriate enforcement. in
So
my
just so we're clear, is it MLE or police that would do the enforcement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, traditionally, Trespass Property Act is done by the police department, although we do have the authority to enforce under the parks bylaw. It would be require us to rejig some of our resources, though.
Yeah, or we could ask the police to put the action unit up there for a while too, just to do some proactive enforcement. Councilor Moon, I see you want to have my attention.
Obviously, the direction's not good enough, so I'm going to bring forward a motion and test the will of committee. I think that, to me, is nonsensical. At the end of the day, a law that's not enforced is not worth even having. And if we're concerned that people are going to run away from the law being enforced, at the end of the day, where do we draw the line on that one? From a criminal perspective or bylaw, whatever, at the end of the day, people need to be held accountable. There's a bylaw on the books. So I move that for this season, that the bylaw proactively enforce the laws on the books at this location accordingly and aggressively, and to report back with how many charges or a report on that activity at the end of the season. And that's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Collins.
Okay, I'm going to finish the speakers list before I come back to a motion on that. So Councillor Pearson.
I'm not sure if you have committee members first. Go ahead.
Well, I'll come back to Councillor Jack. She's a second-time speaker, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the conversation today. And I'm here because I've had a number of residents in my ward that have expressed major concern of not only the issues of our fire department having to do rope rescues and being in the area too many times, unfortunately. So I'm here actually in support of direction to be proactive enforcement, and certainly would have no issue with posting a fine if people are caught in the area, and it should be a substantial fine, I believe, in order to stop this from going on. So through you, if I can, to staff, if they're caught trespassing, what is the fine currently?
Ken?
Through Mr. Chair, I'd have to, it's been a while since I laid one of those, but they're usually about $150. And I'm not sure what the set fine for trespassing is, because municipal law enforcement doesn't traditionally do trespassing.
Mr. Chairman, through you, could I ask that that information be provided to us? Because I would appreciate having it so that I can publicize that as well.
Ken?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll reach out to the police department and get the set fine. And then we'll also look at some historical fines that we are receiving in provincial courts under the Parks bylaw.
So you'll put that out to all members of council by email then, Ken, once you get that from the police?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Councillor Pearson?
Appreciate. And again, as I said, I certainly support this going forward, and I'm monitoring to see how it goes this year. If it does slow down or decrease or eliminate the problem that we're having, that would be great. And if not, I support even increasing the fines going forward in the future. Or charges, because if I remember correctly, we just had recently, there was an incident in Toronto on the Bluffs where two siblings were stuck up on top, and they were actually fined for having to be rescued, and they were actually charged for that event. And I don't believe we're at this point now. I think we're just at the point of charging for trespassing. So I certainly support this initiative going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jackson for a second time. Oh, no, Councillor Connolly for first time.
Thank you. I agree with most things happening here. And these signs are universal signs from what I understand. We're not making up our own signs. They're conservation signs. They're used all over. So they'll be very familiar to people.
Just get clarity on that if you like. Kara, is that correct? They're off-the-shelf signs? Okay.
Yeah, she's the one that told me.
Oh. You didn't mention that.
Well, she says it twice now. But I just want to, I know the emphasis is on the Mount Albion Falls, and that's where it should be. But the punch bowl, we've had deaths there. Fortunately not this year, but we did last year. And I'm hoping to get together with both Kara and the Conservation Authority to see what we can do similar to this. And I don't mean similar, I mean similar signs, where it's not safe. I know we have a Jersey barrier stopping somebody from going over the edge. And that Jersey barrier wouldn't stop anybody. It's like 3 feet high, So there is concerns very fortunate nothing's happened there. I hope nothing does, but I just want to make sure that we realize that there's more situations similar to this throughout the city, and the Punch Bowl is one of them that potentially could be disasters in the wait too. So whatever signage and fines we're putting up at Mount Albion, I would hope that we could do the similar thing there. We have to do the best job we can, because if we ever get charged or somebody gets hurt and they take us to court, we want to make sure we've done our due diligence to protect the city and protect the residents, obviously. So I just wanted to bring that forward. Even though it's a major issue today with Mount Albion, we have other areas in the city that have to be looked at too, and we will be looking at those in a few weeks at Punch Bowl. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson?
Mr. Chairman, just two things I want to just finish on a positive note. First of all, the overwhelming majority of visitors to the Albion Falls area the last few years do it safely, do it with caution, do it responsibly. And so the last thing I wanted to get down to a point was legislating behavior. But I've just, unfortunately, with the increased number of incidents, we've got to stem the tide and just put some greater deterrence in place. But I want to say positively, the overwhelming majority of people, when you look at a weekend, the thousands of people, the 3 parking lots that are jammed along the Brow Arbor Road at the top of Mud Street, it's great to see for our city, and I want to applaud those who are exploring our city safely and responsibly. The second thing I want to say to Councillor Marula, I appreciate, and his knowledge of the East Mountain long precedes my time of representing the area. The main thing we were hoping for from committee today was our next step of installing no trespassing signs. You agree with, that's the way to go. If through Councillor Marula's motion, once those signs are up, you give us the thumbs up, and instead of just putting the signs up, you want some form of aggressive enforcement, that's fine, that's great. Today we came just hoping you'd say at least put the signs up and then go from there. So thanks for that.
So just so we're clear on that, Councillor Jackson, do you support doing the aggressive enforcement right now as a ward councillor, or simply to put the signs up and then report back in 2 weeks at the next Public Works meeting?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Kara. Kara, any comment from staff, please?
Through the chair, I believe that we should start some enforcement if we put the signs up. We'll have to speak with bylaw about what that's going to look like.
Okay, thanks, Kara. So, Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate Councillor Marula's care, and again, knowing the area much better than me from his early days. So I'm okay with that. Obviously, it's going to be a matter of resources between municipal law and police, obviously where this falls on their priority scale. But I guess if the messaging with Councillor Marula's motion today is a strong message that's coming after the signs go up, that's probably even better then for the public to make it safer for them. So, Mr. Chairman, yes, I am supportive. I am supportive. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Marula, if one of the speakers, you can put your motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Collins, the staff be directed to initiate aggressive, proactive enforcement of the bylaw at Mount Albion subsequent to the signs being posted, and to report back to committee at the end of the season.
Now, by staff, do you mean municipal law enforcement, police, or both?
Both.
Okay, so we'll have to notify, once you get a council resolution, the police department then too.
Fair enough.
You know, maybe dispatch some of their action officers up there.
Excellent.
Okay, so the motion is pretty clear, is that to reinstall the signs immediately thereafter, I'm hearing from you, Councillor Marula, that proactive enforcement begin. And that the Director of Licensing and Bylaw report back to us through an email on what the fines will be, so we know. Okay, so there's the motion. Councillor Jackson.
But the Parks Manager will leave it to Kara to ultimately report back to Public Works, right?
Correct.
By the end of the year with the statistics.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's how I heard it. Okay, any discussion on it? Councillor Pearson?
Just that information to be circulated on the charts.
Say it again. Can you turn your microphone on? I couldn't hear
I'm
you.
sorry, the information from Mr. Leendertz to be circulated as far as the charges from the police and from bylaw.
Okay, but I think I heard Councillor Jackson say he'd like Kara to report back, but Director Leenders will let us know what the value of the fines are directly to all members of council through a DL council email. Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Thank you very much for this discussion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, it's a big issue. I'd like to go back now to item 11.1, which is the outstanding business list. I need a motion to approve respecting the changes to the outstanding business list is before you. Can I have a motion to that effect? Moved by Conley, seconded by Marula. Seeing none, no further discussion, all in favor? That's carried. No, I'm sorry, Councillor Conley? Okay. Well, I'm going to go private confidential next. I'll go right now if you have general information.
Well, I need somebody from you guys, so don't run away. I saw something in the paper about the photo radar, and that the government is approving it, but I understand it's only good to 80 kilometers an hour. And I thought our hope was to put photo radar on the link and on the parkway, but if it's only approved up to 80 kilometers an hour, how is it going to be used? Through somebody?
Go ahead,
Through
John.
the chair to John Mader.
Through the chair, that's our understanding of the legislation as it is right now. They haven't passed the regulations yet. We'll have to work through that. I don't have an answer as to how we might do that yet.
So is it possible through the chair to send a letter to provincial government, whoever's doing that, to get it extended to a higher rate? Or is there anything we can do to be proactive on this rather than just sitting and waiting for some results that might not happen for months? Through the chair.
Through the chair, our superintendent, Dave Ferguson, is part of the working group that is part of this.
Are you got your mic on? I'm sorry.
The introduction of the 80K limit, if you will, came relatively late in the process. And so Dave is working with his group to try and address that.
So we're trying to address it now? We are, or?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. It's basically useless for us at this point if we can't use it on the link in the Red Hill Parkway. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Marula?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually prepared to even consider lowering the speed limit on the Red Hill to 80 in order to accommodate the installation of the radar. And I'm being very serious. I'll serve notice because the speeding on that street, as we know, is so chronic and so overwhelming that we need some radical action. And if that's what the province has created, the parameters, I'm prepared to debate that we lower it to 80 kilometers. So,
Okay, so we'll take that up once we hear formally and the bill's enacted.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Item 12.1. We have before us item 12.1, a private and confidential report regarding the full equity of transgender and gender non-conformist people. If there's no discussion of the report, we can receive it in open session. If there is discussion on the report, we're required to move into closed session. So what is the committee's wish? Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything new here, Andrea, that you would prefer? Committee goes in camera to hear something that might be important, or can we just, in public session, just receive the confidential report, Mr. Chairman? Through you to Andrea.
Councillor, through the chair, I think all the information that you need is contained in the report. I don't have anything new that would be in addition to that.
So without going in camera and asking you questions, then if we've read it, we can just receive it? Or again, is there something some outcome that you were hoping for beyond what we see in the report, Mr. Chairman? Through you to Andrea.
There's no outcome. Previously, the committee had asked for an update as to the robustness of our policies, and so legal's opinion is included in that document.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So then, Laurie, Mr. Chairman, through you to Laurie, we just in what, public session, just say we received an in-camera document? Thanks, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a draft motion if somebody wants to move it. So I need someone to move then, if we don't need to go in camera, that report CM 17013 respecting the full equity of transgender and gender nonconformist people be received, and that report CM 17013 remain confidential. Does somebody want to move that, or do you want to go in camera? You're moving it, Councillor Marula, second by Councillor Conley. All in favor? Carried. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Conley, second by Jackson. All in favor? That's carried.